we can do a much better job than that. Let's show this appreciation. A few things I want to share before we get started. I'm fully aware, that I am not of the female persuasion, right? So I do want you to understand that just with the men, even when we had our platform with the men, I served a particular purpose of being on that platform with the men. We have a time with the men and the women, and there's a lot of information that is being exchanged and given out. But we don't necessarily come here for information. It's my responsibility as the lead shepherd to help to transform the information and make it insight. We come for insight. The issue is that many times we settle for information, and one person gives information, the other person gives information, and we do nothing with information. And so we leave feeling better because we get information that we've exchanged with the other person. But as the women are up here and they're sharing information, men hear information, but we need that thing to be translated, right? And the same happened with the men. When the men were sharing information, it was my responsibility to somehow take what was being said by Tony or something that was being said by David or Rocky and to translate that and to make it insight so that women can understand maybe what he or one of the men were saying. And so I'm doing the same thing for these women. And we're grateful for their information, and we're praying that the Holy Spirit allows the information to become insight. And as the shepherd, it's my responsibility to make sure that this is done and this is handled with care, right? Because if someone isn't facilitating this dialogue, do you not know how chaotic it can get up here? And so I tried to hand it off to Keisha. And Keisha didn't want any parts of it. And so, yes, we would love to have a panel filled with women and only women. And I'm not here to overtalk them. I'm here to listen and to translate what they're saying. But we do want to hear from these women just like we heard from the men. Amen? And so do me a favor. Try to reserve the urge to maybe interrupt one of them when they're talking. We do have a microphone that is out there in the community. We will have a space and a time for questions or someone to be able to share their thoughts. Now, just like with the men, with the women here, I'm going to encourage the men. At the end of our dialogue, if you have questions or something that you want to share, you can do that. Amen? Men? Oh, thank you. For the two men who said amen. Because see, you will understand, we think that the men aren't interested, but they just are wired differently. And so they got things in their head, but they're not going to just offer it up. And so I got to let them know ahead of time so that they can be thinking about that one thing that is being shared up here. But having said that, I wanted you to make sure that this space is not about me, but I do not take it lightly about the information that is being disseminated from this platform, because I have to answer to anything that is shared from up here. And we're thankful for this space and for the women to be honest. And yes, we're talking about everything under God's Son because we have the platform to be able to do such things. Let me pray for you all as we jump into our conversation. God, bless this time together. Lord, we pray, God, that you speak. And God, we pray that we listen, remove barriers, remove anything that is keeping us from being able to grow. So God, I thank you. I thank you for your Holy Spirit. And I thank you for what you have already done. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Y'all ready? Yeah. Y'all ready? Yeah. Sheesh. So last week, as soon as we concluded our time, I was talking to some of the women. They were like, I was supposed to say this and I didn't say this. I said, you see how it feels when you're up there. You're up there, you think you're going to say this and that, and the time goes by that quickly. And so that's why it's always good to maybe use a minute or two to kind of review. But for those of you who are just coming for the first time, we want to make sure that whenever you come, you don't feel like you left. You should have came to the last one to understand what's taking place here. Last week we talked about a myriad of things, and these women gave their perspectives of what they feel about each of the questions. And I think one of the first questions we had mentioned, just so you'll know what we've been talking about, but you can go online and catch it, is have you ever left a guy in the friend zone although you knew that he was attracted to you and he would prefer to be more than just friends, right? And we asked that question into our discovery, into the men, our discovery. The women don't have a monopoly on the narrative of misusing or abusing the other person when you know that perhaps they want something more, right? And we may not have the intentions to do it a certain way, but I think because there's usually more women speaking, we usually hear the narrative that men don't want commitment. And I'm sure these women up here have had this share of men who they have engaged who did not want commitment, right? And may have led them on. That happens, but it happens for both sex, right? It happens for men, and it also happens for women. And we talked about what those things look like. We also dealt with, I think, a question that was very intriguing. It was a question centered around submission. Right? And so these four women had given their perspective on this term submission, right? And I was talking to some of, because we have different generations, and so some of our seasoned generations, they were able to share how their perspective and how they understood and how they grew into this submission, this term submission, and where it came from and how that looks for them, right? But then on the other hand, you have your mic, so I think you have something to say. Yes.
I was just picking it up, but thinking about the topic of submission, I talked to Isaac after the class, and I said, I jokingly put the mic down when he asked the question last week, and I whispered to Sarah, I said, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to just put the mic down. I don't know what submission, what that word even means. But all jokes aside, is that I don't know what a healthy view of submission looks like. When I would date guys, to me, submission just meant losing myself almost, and so just making myself too available to whatever they needed. And so submission for me meant not being around my friends and just being always available for that person. How they knew Keisha had a man was that she was MIA. You did not see me at all, and just I didn't know what that looked like. I'd never seen that modeled in a healthy way of submission. So for me, submission was losing of self. I didn't have that balance at all.
Right. And so if we're not enhancing our love maps, which we'll talk about that, then as a guy entering into a relationship with you, and when I may present something, or if I'm trying to lead, right, you may experience something that triggers something within you, right? I think you talked about that as well. It may trigger something within you, and I may just throw the baby in the bathwater out at the same time because I feel like she just doesn't want to be led, you know. But the truth is, she doesn't know what submission or deference or sharing, you know, looks like. And so if we're not having those healthy conversations, and if we're not asking questions, then we would assume that a person doesn't want to be submissive, although they don't know what submission looks like. Does that make sense? Did you want to? Well, I know that talking to Sarah, I think she echoed the same thing, which was that she didn't know what submission looked like. She always saw an unhealthy view or unhealthy picture of submission, right? And then for guys who don't know what submission looks like, we feel that we enter into a relationship or a pact or a covenant with a woman, and we feel that we need to beat a woman into submission. Beat is a loose term. I mean, to force them into submission, right? We feel we force someone into submission when submission is a choice. It's a decision, right? And I think for both parties, because we talked about Ephesians, we talked about the text says that both man and woman, husband and wife should submit to one another. And we also talked about how it's a decision for the man, it's a decision for the woman. But I think that you leave it up to them by giving them something to submit to, right? And I think that it's important that we consider that. But enhancing love maps, something that we talk about at the latter part of this series, is something that we really need to engage, because we're not having this conversation in church circles or in religious circles. And it's about time for us to start asking particular questions, because I need to know where Isaac came from. I need to know, since you come from a single parent home, did you ever see submission? Did your mom was she ever submissive to another man? For me, all I knew was something other than that, And so it would behoove us to begin to break down these barriers and to begin having healthy conversations. We also, what's up, Brother Danny? We also have a question that we dealt with last week. What are some things you look for in a man, right? And we had, they got the microphone and they shared their perspectives of the things that they're looking for in a man. And I think one talked about availability, making sure that he's emotionally available. And it's a shame today where when you're engaged by a man who maybe engages you, that you still have to ask, are you married? Or you still have to ask, are you available? Which goes on both ends, right? Emotionally available, we think we are available until we realize we're not available, right? And so it's elusive, right? And we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks, but I talked about how when you engage people, you need to ask yourself a question about the other person, and you need to ask yourself a question about your own self, whether or not it's rebound or rehab. Right? And so many of us, we enter into covenants with people and we want them to repair us, right? And he's not the repair man. She is not the repair man. And so we talk a little more about that. I think what we left off with was this. I think every woman, and statistics shows, they want a lot of things, but one thing that they really, really want to know is that man trustworthy? Can I believe what you say to me? Will you follow through with what you said you will do? Right? And so sometimes I think from a man's perspective, we encounter a woman, and because she asks the same question over and over, or because, she may have some trigger points because she's used to being let down. She's used to encountering men who don't follow through with what they say. But I know one thing is for sure. A woman is looking for a man who is trustworthy. And they said, yes, ma'am. There we go.
The trustworthiness comes first and the submission comes after that. Once you're trustworthy to me, then there can be a huge amount of submission. And I mentioned last time that I made a incredible life change, which was an act of submission, but it was after I knew that he was trustworthy and I could rely on him to do what he said. And then after I made that act of submission, and for those of you who weren't here last week, I was a professional, an executive. I retired early because my family needed me at home. And so I gave up a profession that I had been working on for 25 years. And I found that I was a better person after I did that. I liked who I became after I understood submission, but it didn't come until the trustworthiness was there.
believe it or not, it seems very simple, and my responsibility in translating is that it makes a world of a difference, because from many men's perspective, when we engage a woman, subconsciously we expect submission first. We expect for submission to be a part of the equation at the very beginning, right? We don't look at that as something that we have to work, we got to work to. If you're combative, if you're, too independent, these are things that, we pay attention to at the very beginning. But what I hear, and I think women have to hear it, men have to hear it, is that there has to be a season of showing that you're trustworthy. This goes for women too, for a man as well, right? For a man to be able to feel like he can trust you. You want the title, you want the name change, you want the ring, we want, the things immediately. But I think for men, but more so for this conversation, we need trustworthiness. Can I trust you? And so you're saying, because I knew I could, because my husband shown himself to be trustworthy, which, yes, you married him, right? But it still took some more time, because when you're talking about an element of submission where you give part of who you have learned, just who you were making money, you were making a living for yourself, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And yet the husband is hoping that you would come off the job, because most men would hope that that could be the scenario. Not all men, but in order for you to do that, you needed trustworthiness from him. Correct? Amen. Thank you for that. I think we left off with that same thing, in that one thing we have a tendency to do, because I confess my own self. I say that I want a woman who is independent, only to find out that she's too independent. And I'm like, there's no room for interdependence, right? And so I've learned that. And so I know we were talking, Sarah had mentioned how she was looking for a man who was a leader, right? And that's a great thing to look for. But what I was saying from my own perspective, and for those of us, because I have to translate, is that you got to be careful what you have on your list, right? You have to be careful of the appetite that you allow to come forth, because you may not have the capacity, and you're asking God for something from someone else that you don't even show in your own self, right? And so men do it, we do it, but you ask for particular quality in someone only to have it to show its face, and then you abuse or misuse it, or you sabotage it, right? I've done it before. You ain't got to raise your hand. It happens all of the time. And so, yes, we want a woman who is God-fearing until she, because for me, I want a woman who is independent, and then all of a sudden she's too opinionated, right? And then, this is just too much, but then I have to recognize you got to be careful what you ask for. So what you're saying, you say you want a man who's a leader, and then you find a man who is confident in his calling, who is unwavering, and he literally puts Jesus before you, and then you get jealous, right? Let's just have an honest conversation, right? It's always church, it's always God, but you can't say that because you'll look bad, right? Y'all don't want to have real conversation in this place, but it's okay. So having said that, we would that's kind of some of the things that we talked about. Not everything in totality. You go online and you can kind of hear some of the things that we share, but we're going to proceed a little further. We have Stephanie, who is kind of helping to navigate a couple of our questions. Did you have something for us?
Of course.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I hope so.
All right.
Well, I'm not. They asking the questions, not me.
Kicking off the questions for today. Have you ever continued to date someone or remained in a situationship even though you knew deep down that wasn't your husband?
You knew deep down they weren't your husband.
So I'm going to reiterate that question, because I think we had a similar question last week, didn't we? It wasn't the same
About the friend
question.
zone. Mm-hmm.
It was a friend zone. So you're saying last week we talked about keeping a man in a friend zone, knowing that he wants more from you, right?
Right.
And so you're saying now, have you ever remained in a situationship with a man
With a man.
after its expiration date?
Correct.
you know this ain't your husband,
Exactly.
but you stay in the relationship or the marriage.
Right.
Or you got married to him and you know that this was not the move.
Yes. Don't all speak at once.
I think for me, I've stayed in relationships knowing deep down that he would never commit. And I think for me, I became what Isaac referred to one time as the circus performer, and just trying to get him to change his mind or see me differently or be something that I thought he wanted, and inevitably losing who I was. So, and it was interesting in talking to Isaac a couple of weeks ago about this, because I always thought that that was a form of insecurity, to where I was trying to be something that, you know, I wasn't in order to get this man to commit. And he was like, well, that's a form of manipulation. And I was like, ooh. So,
Before y'all get mad at me, it didn't come out like that. That is not how the conversation went. You know, like I didn't just shoot a dagger at her. No.
No, I was summarizing.
Yeah, it was layers to it. Can somebody help me up here?
I can't.
Please?
I can't. Let me.
'Cause I could feel the heat. And it ain't coming from the lights. It was not like that.
I will even add that we had a similar conversation about thinking that the cookie can keep him, and it can't.
Cookie. The urban ebonic transliteration for cookie would be sex. All right? All right, okay.
Yeah. So thinking that sex will make him stay, and that is pure manipulation. At its core is that if I do this, I can get you to do this. And so, yeah, we had a similar conversation, and knowing that you know that you probably still know that he ain't for you, but if I do this, he'll still stay. And I want him to stay because I want the companionship, and I want the companionship, but I also like the convenience because I've put in the work and I've put in the time, and I don't want to let him go because then I have to start all over again, you know, with somebody else. And it is nothing like getting to know somebody's ins and outs, flaws, and okay, at least if you already got them, you know what you got. But if you got to start all over again, then it's just work that you have to put in, you know, all over again. And so, okay.
well, and just listening to Rocky speak when the men were up here and him saying that, you know, that sex would maybe cause him to stay a little longer when he really wasn't into the person. He might be eyeballing somebody over here, but he may be addicted to the sex, and it will cause him to stay, inevitably drawing out a relationship that didn't need to be in the first place.
Your sex may captivate his attention, but it won't keep his attention. I have to use words, I have to use alliteration that you can remember. It may captivate his attention, but it won't keep his attention. Yeah. And so here's the understanding is that what I hear is that we stay in relationships. What I hear is because of hope. You hope things would change, right? You stay in relationships. It almost seems an element of trying to control the outcome, right? And so to some degree, that can become manipulation. We don't look at it like that, but using your sex, if your sex has someone or has a man there, you doing it together, whatever it takes to, it won't keep him there. And so men often stay in relationships hoping. Men often stay in relationships hoping to control the outcome. What tends to happen, though, is that the men are the ones that kind of get the rap for being the ones that are kind of leading things on. We both stay in relationships having two different conversations in our head, hoping that you would not look physically, but something that he's hoping to get you to change or something. It will change, and if it doesn't change, then you know it's too late. We got a response. Yes, ma'am. Come on. Come on. I'll pick up when you jump in.
Well, I think part of the relationship dynamic is the difference in, we talked a little bit about this last week, I know as a young professional, when I was building a career and I wasn't really concerned about relationships, and this comes to are you available, because I would say probably until I was 40 years old, I really wasn't available because I was building a career. I was doing what I wanted to do. I liked my independence. I made enough money that I could do whatever and be comfortable. And so for men to understand that there are women out there up until at least for me, up until 40 years old, I was not looking for a long-term relationship at all. I had some relationships. I was married. But I never really committed to some of those relationships like I should have to be in those relationships.
Sure.
I was, and I think my relationships were much more superficial at that point in time.
Right. I appreciate that feedback, and because we're in this is just a couple of moments, we're going to dive into a little bit more into what you're sharing. Just want to make sure we close this. You had your hand on the microphone when we were talking about, just in case you get something to share. But we're talking about women, sex, staying in a relationship past its expiration date, hoping that he would change, hoping that things would. And I think you said something that you don't want to start over. Right, you've been in a relationship. Now, I just said the same thing she said. Nobody said nothing, right? Yeah. But she said it. Everybody about to jump out their seats. Now, I'm just playing. But one thing is true, is that when women use sex more often, and men do it too, as a tool to try to coerce a man into submission, right? And so if you have to coerce, convince, try to control a man to commit to you, then I think you have enough information. Whether or not you want to have that honest conversation with oneself, if you have to do that, you should know that it's past its expiration date. Yes, ma'am.
And I think you have to know yourself, because in past relationships, maybe that's what you felt like you had to do, not necessarily being manipulative, but that
Sure.
that if I gave him that, and then he would stay, and that's what he wants. In the end, that's what he wants, so that's what I'll give him. And so I think you have to realize that. You have to know you're not manipulating. In the end, that's not how it is. You don't have to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes back then I would automatically just go into, okay, might as well. I mean, this is what he wants anyways. But that was more me than what I thought and what I was assuming. So you have to look at yourself and be like, no, that's not the way to do it.
You have to know your worth as a woman, correct? And men have to know their worth too. We don't talk about that enough. And in many situations, men don't know what they want. They tell you they want sex. They don't know what they want. But he will respect your boundaries whether he complains about it or not. A man may complain about the boundaries you have, but if you don't tell me I can't call you after 9 o'clock, then I'm going to keep calling you after 9 o'clock. And I may complain because you give me a 9 o'clock curfew to call you. I can't be calling you at 11:59 talking about some what you doing, boo. I may complain, but at the end of the day, I will respect it. And so I think that it's important that we realize that. And I know somebody mentioned, what is y'all view of sex? I came in and, y'all talking about sex and sex. Yeah, we're this context, just so everybody knows, we're trying to be conducive to just authentic conversation. We know that fornication, adultery, sex outside, premarital, all these things are forbidden and not necessarily in God's will. We understand this. This is what is taught from this pulpit. But many times we beat people down with what's wrong, that we never allow people to talk and really be able to share the things that we understand is wrong. But let's just have this real conversation about what's going on, right? Embedding, I think we stay in relationships. Embedding is a psychological term that refers to people who usually attach themselves to information that's given from the other person although the other person may also give them contradictory information. And so we enter into a covenant, or we meet a man, in this context, not me meeting a man, but you all meet a man. And he may say something that is pleasant to your ears, and you attach yourself, you embed yourself to whatever is shared. And although his actions may say something else, and although he may also say something that contradicts what he may have said in the beginning, but because you have embedded yourself and you've allowed yourself to focus on that one thing, you stay in a situation even when it shouldn't be a situation, right? We'll keep on going. Y'all ain't got to talk about that. There was a question that they answered last week that I didn't get a chance to kind of give feedback, but it was, you women who are looking for a commitment, not you all, just women looking for a commitment. When you meet a man, what are initial questions? We want to know, what are the initial questions that come, what are the initial things that come to your head when you meet a man? Not just a woman playing around, a woman who looking for commitment. You got notes?
I think I spoke a little bit about that last time. I said, I look to see if he's a patient person. So I kind of talked about that. But I also, when he's talking about it, especially if you're dating someone that's been married before, another thing that I listen for is how he talks about his children, how he talks about his ex-spouse. Was everything her fault? Is there no responsibility that he's taking? Because inevitably there were two people in the marriage. So, I just want to hear, is he, bashing her the whole time,
Yeah, I think it's listening to him about a number of those things. So family, how he feels about family, how he feels about friendships. For me, being that I have a male as a best friend, can you, how do you handle that? Work, is he one to gripe and complain about work, or is he, a problem solver? I dated someone last year, or was talking to somebody last year, and it was a lot of talk about work, but more like griping and complaining, but no action. So those are things that I ask, and I listen to if he's complaining about finances, which tells me if he's managing his money well or not. And so I think those are not necessarily questions. Those aren't questions. Those are just things that I'm listening to, that are things that are going through my mind. Sure. Because, if marriage is the long term, marriage is the goal, period. And so these are things that are going through my mind. Does he manage his money well? How does he deal with conflict? If he has a child, how does he interact with that mother? Is he projecting everything on her and taking no responsibility for himself? So these are all kinds of things. I'm thinking about everything when I meet you, and so
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
Y'all don't have to cut it off when y'all not speaking on it.
I think when I'm looking for a commitment, when I first meet someone, you're looking. Are they attractive? Are they smart? Are they fun? Do they have good financial prospects? Or all that sort of thing. But I think the mistakes I made in asking myself is I didn't ask the questions deeply enough. I didn't get to the core of who we both were, spiritually, emotionally. Those things just didn't come up. Like some of the conversations we're having today are good conversations to have with somebody that you're thinking about making a commitment to. One thing my husband and I did, which was actually hilarious, and I would recommend it to any couple thinking about making a stronger commitment. We listened to the together the book or tape about men are from Mars and women are from Venus, because as you listen to that, they bring up things, and my husband and I took it in sort of a lighthearted vein because we'd pointed it, that's you, you do that. So it gives you a fun way of maybe talking about some things that you normally just wouldn't come up in conversation. And there are some good examples. I know the service they had a good while ago about the 5 love languages. There's a book on that as well, and that's very good for both of you to experience together, because anytime you can experience those kinds of things together, then it digs deeper than your normal conversations might go.
Sure.
It asks some real deep things and the men have to be willing to share. Hopefully by that time you've established a trusting relationship to where you feel comfortable, and they do too, sharing those more intimate, deep-seated feelings.
Yeah, amen. Men will certainly talk the more we trust, right? And so it's a process for us as well. One thing I think I hear you all saying is, and it's the same thing for me, is that I look for emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is very important. We don't talk about it enough. Everybody, I saw a meme. Everybody has grown until it's time to communicate, right? But emotional maturity is listening to the conversation and listening to how the other person talks about their past. Listen to how they talk about their past, because for me, if someone is more willing to always point their finger at other people, if other people are always the problem, that's a problem for me, right? And so for me, it's much more attractive when a woman can own her own emotions, own her own feelings. The same for a man is when you can. We're imperfect beings, but your ability to acknowledge your mess up and to call it out, I think that's for me a beautiful thing. And so I think we don't talk about emotional maturity enough, right? Because we have people who are in adult bodies, but you got these children kind of trapped in adult bodies type of thing. But I would tell you this, there is a list and kind of studying. These are some things I believe women ask themselves, and we'll go to that good question, is he dependable? Can I trust him? I know that says the same thing, but this is doubly what they're asking, because this is important. Is he dependable? Can I trust him? Will he choose me? Will he always choose me? I'm going to start this over. Women, they need to hear you go, They need to know that he on point. Is he dependable? Can I trust him? Will he choose me? I know it's important because every woman wants a man to choose them. Yeah. It's a true statement, right? But choosing is just one part of the equation. Will he always choose me? There's going to be beautiful women. We're going to go through seasons of drought. Will he still choose me, right? Will he love my flaws? I believe women ask these questions, right? They make it to themselves. Will he find me attractive as I get older and as I gain weight? We can laugh, joke, but this is true. This is true story. Does he have a sense of humor? Can he make me laugh? I know we went from one spectrum to another, but almost every woman wants a man who can, in some shape, form, or fashion, have some sense of humor. Make me laugh. I think, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because I was joking with Isaac that I met this guy last year, and I was like, I love Jesus. If you know me, you know I do, but I don't want to talk about Jesus 24/7. And he was a pastor, and do not stone me for saying it, but it was the fact that I said, can we talk about anything else? Like, I never got to know anything else, about him, because the conversation didn't go further than that. I want to be able to get to know you, and I want to know you by talking to you and not texting you, for the record, because
I think that's my cue to get off the stage.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they're meeting people these days, and I don't know if dating has changed, or people have changed, or if I'm old school, but I want to talk to you on the phone, or perhaps see you face to face and talk coffee, food, whatever, walk in the park, but not texting. And texting is not a relationship. That's not how you get to know somebody, and I can't read you off of that alone.
So, to summarize her point, she says talk, don't text. And that goes both ways. But we appreciate that perspective. So yes, does he have a sense of humor? If you don't, guys, I'm not telling you to create one. Just know that it's nothing worse than for you to try to create a sense of humor and you ain't got one, Will he, a couple of more, will he pay me the attention I require? One of the greatest complaints with women against men, or wives against husband, is the sense of disconnection, right? She wants to always feel emotionally connected in some shape, way, or form with you. And so men, because we have things in file cabinets, and we come in the house from work and we're thinking about that very thing that we got to get done. And so we totally look past everything. And so we have to teach ourselves and train ourselves to understand the language that they speak. Men, brain, women, heart. We'll talk about that another time. But will he care for me? Yeah, they do ask the question, will he satisfy me sexually? Y'all can act like y'all don't ask that question. I'm not saying y'all doing it. Let's just have a real conversation.
Yeah.
Sheesh. Yes.
Hey,
hold on. Danny, you came in when I was saying that. That's not what I was, that's just a small element of what I was talking about. Yes, ma'am.
And I think just being a single mom, to throw out that, will he love my children as his own? Bringing in children into a relationship, and I have a growing young man, and how you're going to cultivate their relationship with him. And mothers are a package deal, and I meet people who look at I want her, but it's like, it's not just me, it's them that comes with me. And my daughter, will you be an example of a man for her? So that's a question that I ask.
Amen.
As a single mom.
And I asked similar to that because I don't have any kids. I asked, do they have kids? And then if they do, what is the relationship with their child's mother? Is it a healthy relationship or not? Because it is a package deal. Mm-hmm. So, you can come in, and if it's a very toxic relationship, that's going to cause drama. That's going to cause issues in your relationship. So those are some questions I ask myself too. And I think a lot of the questions that you were saying are true. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those questions at the beginning, I feel like more deal with that woman personally. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to be, a lot of those questions when you're reading them, I just hear insecure. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you have to be secure in yourself. You have to be confident. Will he still think I'm attractive when I get older? Yeah. Yes, we all think that, but mm-hmm. It's like, it comes to like, you have to be sure in yourself, and you have to be confident in yourself. If you're not confident in that, if you don't love yourself, someone else, they're not going to be able to fill that void. Sure. So it's like, yes, we do ask those questions. We shouldn't have to ask ourselves those questions, but we do ask ourselves those questions. But then you need to look at yourself and be like, why are you asking those questions?
Sure.
But then I think the opposite of, I would ask that question because for me, it's from a loyalty standpoint versus an insecurity standpoint, because it's, will he remain loyal to me, versus it's not me questioning, me as a woman saying, well, if I gain weight, then he's not going to love me. Is that, will he remain loyal to me even if I gain weight?
Because what a guy is saying to himself is, out here hustling, bustling, and trying to make a living for the family, if I lose my job and I lose everything, mm-hmm. will she still be on my team?
Yeah.
It's not insecure. It's saying that I know this world that I live in, and I need to know that if I don't have any money to my name, we're going to have our backs to each other, and we're going to be out here scrapping, trying to make it do what it do. Yeah. I want to know what is the level of loyalty, right? Because what I have learned in my position and what I do is that we on the mountaintop, everybody want to join me, be friends, and have a covenant when I'm on the mountaintop. But when I'm in the valley, don't nobody want to know who I am. And so I need a woman. And I ask myself these questions. I would love to ask her that, but it's a form of respect and loyalty. And we ask these things from multiple perspectives, but we understand that too much of anything is unhealthy, because asking that question every day, all day, then you got to ask yourself why. But I'm going to tell you, a man is asking the same question in a different way because it's important. We need to know this, and if we know this, then you see a whole different type of man. I told you all this Superman, the Clark Kent, it's important, right? But we have one more question.
And it's along those same lines. So after marriage, in this day and age, a lot of women aren't as dependent on a man to take care of them, right? So as a result, a growing number of men are afraid their wives don't need them. What do you think most women desire or need from their men in the 21st century in a relationship or marriage?
Just so you all, No, if you understand the question, I want to make sure that they understand what's being asked. Because, yeah.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah.
Um,
After marriage, most women are not dependent upon a man to provide for them in a traditional sense, right? Because women work now, they're able to sort of take care of themselves, and basically. So as a result, a growing number of men are afraid their women or their wives don't need them. What do you think most women desire or need from their men in the 21st century relationship or marriage?
It's a good question.
I believe that the best thing that a man can do to be a leader, to show his trustworthiness, all these things we've been talking about, is something that a woman wants. They want to be rescued. When you're having a really bad day, what you want is you want somebody that will sit down and listen to you. Don't fix me. I have to do that myself. But be there for me. And that's what I mean by rescue. I need someone that can put their arms around me or pat me on the head or get me out of my bad mood if I need that. Or I had an example of where a number of us were trying to achieve something, and the man who ultimately became my husband, everybody else had failed in what they were doing, and I was in this circle of people, but I had succeeded. And so I felt terrible. I felt bad that I had succeeded and all my friends had failed. And so he called me and said, well, what happened? And I said, well, I feel awful. I said, I passed, but nobody else here did. And he said, I'm going to come and get you because you need to celebrate your win. And that spoke volumes to me. And that's what I mean by rescue. And I'm very independent, I'm professional, all that sort of thing. But even I was probably one of the more independent women in my lifetime. And just as much as every woman is independent these days, but there are times when we want to be rescued.
And this is along the lines of emotional intimacy, connection, attention, right? This is a mistake that men make with women because we're linear thinkers, we're problem solvers, right? And so when there is a problem, the thing that we're trying to do is solve the problem. We're quiet, not because we're not attentive. We're quiet because as you're talking about the problem, because when you come home from work or when we're on the phone and you're going on about this problem that you're experiencing, and most of the time it's from work, what we're thinking, if we're in your presence, we're thinking about all of the possible solutions to go ahead and remedy the problem. What I have come to learn and am learning right now is the error in our ways is that they're presenting to us a problem and it comes packaged saying, help me with the problem. We think that you need an answer to the problem. And so we're prepared to now give you the answer to why the reasons why you shouldn't feel all these ways about the people who didn't fail, when in fact, They don't want a solution. Men, let me tell you something. What I'm learning right now, they just want you to listen. Hold on. Listen. So when she said that, I was like, yeah, she just opened the door for me. Like, because I'm like, Lord, how do I get this point across? And this point is something I said, man, I didn't realize this. Today I didn't realize. I'm like, so you mean to tell me that most of the time they just want to talk and they just want you to listen? Yeah. What you need what can I do for you? What would you like for me to do? I really want to tell you, here the 1, 2, 3. Here are the 3 things, and we can remedy that. There's no problem. What that translates to women is a dismissive and a disconnection, right? I didn't know this. I didn't know that you being solution-oriented, you're literally stopping what you're doing, put the phone up, you're listening. You think you're doing right because you're listening. Yeah, you're absolutely. And you come with solutions, but in their mind, because you came with a solution, it's a form of dismissive, it's a form of disconnection when all she wants you to do, Isaac, is just to listen and offer a simple, let me come be with you. Let me put my arm around you. It's okay, And I'm like, well, why don't they just say that, But here's the thing. That's the difference, because the book that I'm working on, the things I'm working on is men are trying to speak to women's brains, their brains, and women, they're trying to speak to men's, they're speaking from their heart, their emotion, they're speaking from their heart. They're trying to get this man to talk with their heart. He's trying to speak with his brain, logic. He's all logic. She's not all logic, but he's more logic and she's more emotion. And we just making the miscommunication. And it's something that I'm learning. If I'm learning, I think another man in here needs to learn it too.
It's a form, when you start trying to fix me, like I said, I have to fix me. You can't fix me. You can listen to me. But it's a form of disrespect almost if you begin to feel like, I didn't come to you for an answer. I'll figure out the answer. But I do have a thought process myself that I have to go through. And a lot of times that thought process is verbalization of the issues and the problems. And as I talk about it, because I'm one of those people, I have to talk to people about issues that I have. And hopefully I'm talking to my spouse. I mean, we're more verbal than men are. So we want to talk. And sometimes hearing ourselves say things out loud is the way we figure out how to fix ourselves. But for a man to just say, here's what you need to do, no.
And this is so fascinating because you're absolutely right in that most women just want to talk it out. And then I think there is a balance, because if I can speak frankly, not combative, from a guy's perspective, I think the balancing act is you usually ask me for advice to fix something, and so I have to determine when you actually want me to fix something and when you just want me to listen, right? Because there's many times when you want me to fix it, and I'm used to fixing it because this is the nature of some of our relationship. But then there's 60% of the time you may want me to fix it, or there's 40% of the time you may want me to fix it. 60% of the time you just want to listen. And so from a guy's perspective, we don't, and it's not a scapegoat. Let's just have honest conversation. It's like, and you're right. What would you like me to do here? Am I in fix-it mode or am I listen mode?
Well, don't say that. No. Don't ask that question.
It depends on the nature of your relationship. Because she could be able to be like, no, I want you to listen. Like, I need you to listen. I need this person. Whatever, So you can have a type of relationship where you don't get offended by simple, I need a listening ear. Or I need you to fix this because I'm tired of, because it could be the recurring issue on the job, right? And so you can come to him about the same issue that is recurring, and at some point in time, it's like, how many times you want me to listen to this same issue before I get to offer? But it's a balancing act. But what you're saying is insight that I think men need to understand, is that many times we don't need to be rescued. We just want you to listen. I'll fix myself. Just listen to what I'm presenting to you, and that is education.
The listening is the rescue.
The listening is the rescuing, of course. And I think that is learning from a guy's perspective. Guys, we ain't always got to fix everything. We ain't always got to have the logical answer to everything. They got the answer. If they just let them talk, they'll formulate the answer and fix it themselves. You were going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say I completely agree. But when she said that we're verbal, that we work out problems verbally, and so I said something last week about not going to your friends and speaking poorly about your significant other. But that's why a lot of women do that, because if we're in an argument and you walk out and you go play basketball with your friends and something you guys said you're able to compartmentalize, we're not. So when you leave, and I'm speaking for myself and a few friends, and the ladies can agree or disagree, but I feel like when you leave in the middle of an argument that's unresolved, we're still trying to work out the problem. You're gone. So, then we're talking to mom or our friends or whoever will be there to listen. And then the second part of that is when you're playing basketball with your friends, having a great time, and we're in the middle of an argument, it looks as if though you could care less when that might not be, a fact.
Absolutely. That makes all the sense in the world. Ladies, gentlemen, all right, so I don't need you all leaving this place. They get out. Look, I know you all get the shift. Don't tell them time we get out, because we're trying to make sure that we get everything covered, because we can't do a part 3 to this same. But there was one particular thing, thank you, Steph, there was one particular thing I wanted to mention, and that was something about womanhood, right? The question was, how do you define womanhood? What makes you feel like a woman, right? And I asked this question because I was supposed to ask the same. Well, I did ask the same thing for the men, right? And there was conflict and confusion, right? Because roles and responsibilities have changed over the years, and what a man had been accustomed to doing, providing protection and preservation. That's not necessarily the case today, because as you have already indicated, you are making your own living. You are taking care of your own self. So coming into a relationship with the man, that's not necessarily the first thing you're looking for. And so in 21st century, that looks totally different. But when it comes to womanhood, and we'll close on this, what makes you feel like a woman? How do you define womanhood? And I'd love to learn.
I think what makes me feel like a woman is being the nurturer that I am, taking care of my family, taking care of my man when we're together. But how would I define womanhood? I have no idea. I don't know what womanhood looks like. I don't know what that should look like, because then I feel like it's then placing gender roles. And so I honestly don't know how to answer that question. What is womanhood? I don't know what that word means in that regard. So.
Sure.
Well, in that same, I think the nurturing part, all women are nurturers. So being able to be nurturing or to take care of your man or help in that way. But also for me, being strong and being independent and being respected helps me feel like is woman to me. And I think it goes back to what have you seen kind of growing up as well. If you were raised like in a single parent household and you saw mom taking care of everything, then, you kind of take on that role. And kind of going back just a little bit about when women are so independent, what do we want from men? I said, for me, it's like to be able to respect those roles and that I am independent. And to be able to work together and still feel appreciated and still feel that it's okay that I'm independent and I work hard and I'm strong and you can be too. and having that equal respect and those equal roles.
And
Feeling equal.
And I think that's important. I think it's important coming from a particular generation. I think that looks slightly different, for every generation. Because when we start talking about independence, I think what happens is there's so much independence, there's not enough interdependence, right? And so we don't spend enough time talking about, I think roles are important. Roles and responsibilities are important. We don't leave that up to assumption, right? But it's difficult. It's more difficult for the woman, the modern woman, than it is for the modern man. We talked about the men and how, from the beginning, we were the ones out there hunting and bringing the food and providing the home and all this. And the women they were at home and they were rearing the children, and that's how they got their identity from their role. But today, though, it's a total different world, because if you go to Afghanistan, the women, they're still denied health care. They can't even, there's so many limitations on the woman in places like Afghanistan. I think it's in Saudi Arabia. Women just got the ability to drive just last week. Just last week, they were able to drive. And America is one good place, but women, it's so convoluted. It's so confusing, because women have to be in the workplace. And in the workplace, they are the competitor, because they're still trying to get the respect that they deserve, that they're not necessarily getting in most spaces, and yet they're still responsible for rearing the children and taking care of the home. And so it becomes so many different things that we can't necessarily define what that looks like right now. And so asking the question is a loaded question, truth of the matter. It's a loaded question, but it's a question that's worth discussing. Now, again, for 20s and 30s, that may be a much difficult question to answer, but 40s, 50s, or 60s, that may not be that different. But I do understand that, because when we say, like, respecting, me being independent, then there's still the question, what does that look like, though, in a relationship, in a marriage? Because if you're depicted or you're presented as super strong and not needing, that this is where the men have the tension of how am I needed? Like, what is needed? And so we talk about the emotional intimacy, which wasn't necessarily the top 2 or 3 30 years ago, And so providing, a home and providing food on the table was the top 3 things. But today, that's not the top 3. And so men are like, what is it that you need from me? Because you make more money than I do. You bring home the bacon, the pig, the duck, and everything. And so I think that it begins to shift towards respect, passion, emotional intimacy. So it looks different. But if we're not having a conversation in our relationships and hopefully marriages, then the 21st century home will remain in a disarray, because we're not having these conversations. We assume that you understand how I feel about women and the roles and men and what I'd like from you, and we don't talk about it. And some of us have an archaic view of how it should be, and some of us see the visions on TV, and so we get archaic, and then we get the modern, and we're trying to breathe. Nobody's talking, we're just assuming. And then, we have these barriers that are built up because nobody's talking about what submission looks like, roles and responsibilities. Because we have daycares now, we have nannies. Here's an issue. I have a close friend. She's a nurse practitioner. Makes buku of money as long as I've known her. Been in the Army Reserve and everything. I mean, she got it. And she finally got married, and we're happy and support the marriage. And we were talking recently. She was like, my husband, she makes more money, like twice more money than him, but he makes good money, though. Like, they have a good lifestyle. But she was complaining. She was like, I don't know if this marriage is going to work, because he works all the time. He works 12 hours a day, and he works 6 days out of 7. He's never home. I get to be home, and work from home and do a lot of different things, but he's never home, and I want him to be home more and be present with me more. And I was just like, man, it's tough. It's tough because, one, we want these things, but that will require a change in lifestyle. Most women aren't willing to change the lifestyle. We want the man to be, I'm not saying anything is right. I'm just saying look at the whole spectrum of things, because they got a nanny, they got multiple homes in states, But if he comes off his job and again, if you're not talking about roles and what you don't need from him and what you hope we can build our own home, our own agenda, we can build what we desire to build. If you don't have that conversation, he's working those jobs because he thinks he needs to, right? And if you never released him from that and let him know the things that you would like from him, and knowing yourself, you got to know yourself, because if you tell him that you want him home more and then he home too much and he's too emotional and too clingy, then you need to go back out into the workforce, because I see too much of you. I have married couples who've been married for 30, 40 years. He finally got, he's home now, retired, and the wife is like, you need something to do because I'm looking at you too much. So you got to be careful. But she presented to me that dilemma, and I said, man, because she is the epitome of a modern woman who has made a way for herself and has a man who makes a great living, but he's working, but she wants him to stop working to be home with them more so they can spend more time. And I'm like, I get that. I get everything you're saying, but look at it from another perspective as well. Now, if you're telling me you're willing to alter your lifestyle, you're willing to do these things, y'all need to have a conversation and see where that goes, right? You were going to say something and we'll close.
My husband worked 12-hour shifts, and a lot of them. And the way we worked around that was that we would talk. And when he first wanted me to call him every couple hours while he was on the shift, I was concerned that I had been married before to someone who was jealous. And that began to resonate with me. And then he and I talked about it seriously. And the thing is, he said, I'm gone 12-hour shifts, and I want to have more contact with you than that. I have things that go on my shift or in my day, and I just want to either be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, so-and-so just happened, because you're top of my mind, and I want to share as my 12 hours goes on. And so we had a very, very close relationship, and I say this kind of for your friend, but for other people as well. You can have a tremendous relationship with someone even when they're gone a lot, because as long as you stay in touch, and you also, when he would work his 12-hour shifts, he'd come home and sleep, and then for about 2 hours a day, between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, that was our time.
Right.
And we devoted that time. I mean, it was when the child was still in school. We could go out to have dinner at 3 p.m. and nobody else was around. And so you can squeeze out some time in your day and have a really, really strong relationship, even if you're both going in 3,000 directions at the same time.
Let's show them how we feel about them, you all. Thank you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his countenance to shine upon you. As you leave from this place, you will never leave from God's presence. I pray that the Lord blesses you like never before, and I pray that you expect the blessing from him. I appreciate you all for being here in Jesus' name. Amen. Listen, thank you all for being here. We won't see you next week, but we'll see you out there for Service Project. I don't care what break y'all take. Y'all need to be back here in 2 weeks. Not next Sunday, but the week after, so we can dive more into this Bible study. Y'all come up here and bless these women for being very open and sharing with us their hearts.